Hi everyone. Well, we're back again here, and I have, I think, one more I want to do in this session here, and it's kind of been a really favorite topic of mine, and I did want to kind of get a couple of videos on it so I can get some feedback on it. And it's called Healing Your Inner Child. I have been noticing as of late that a lot of people have been experiencing a lot of symptoms and a lot of emotional and mental upheavals and aspects of themselves that are coming up. And I want to address this in kind of an interesting way. Some years back, when I went, as some of you know, to the dream state school that I went to that assisted me in developing the healing modality that I actually present now, when I participated in that school, there was presented to us different aspects or different bodies, if I can put it that way, that we would get to work on. We never actually got to work on a physical body. We would get to work on the etheric body or the mental body or the emotional body and some of the sheath bodies. And one of the things that I had noticed in going there is that a lot of the techniques that we were shown were particularly addressed to these particular sheath bodies, and one in particular I'm going to call the inner child. Some of you relate it more to being the subconscious as we know it. And I always had an issue with the word subconscious because it sounds like some nebulous thing that we know very little about, which is pretty much the truth. I like to call it the inner child. And I'm finding in many cases here that when we're having issues in our lives of an emotional or mental or even of a physical nature, they all have to do in direct relationship with the inner child, or what some people call the subconscious. And I made a rather startling discovery some years back when I found out that I was hopelessly in a pile of difficulty myself and I needed some help. And I went out and I started looking at the information, the positive thinking, and this was before the internet. And I could find a lot of positive attitude books. Think and Grow Rich would be one, an old book by Napoleon Hill. And there were a few others around at that time, but I always found that there seemed to be a piece missing. They didn't go deep enough. And what I started to learn during the time that I spent in the school, that the biggest part of the problems that most of us have in our life all seem to come and are manifested and taken on in the time that we are children, but more importantly, at the time of puberty. Now I'm talking about physical puberty, when we move from being children into adult males and females. And what I had discovered is that, like many who already know, is our personality starts to begin to form in childhood and goes on through all of the years. But I found at the time of puberty that it was a very important phase, probably the most important time in our life, because at the outcome of puberty, which ends at about, 18, 19, I guess maybe could go to 20, and some people would be some variations, I guess, in that perspective, is pretty much the rest of that person's life is dictated and going to manifest physically, mentally, and emotionally directly by the experiences that they have had during the time of puberty. And the reason that I say this is I believe, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the inner child, or what some people call the subconscious, has a state of consciousness. And I believe there are some people who seem to think that the consciousness is rather limited, that it doesn't change or it doesn't evolve, and that it is simply the recipient of our experiences and what we download into it. I, however, take a different kind of perspective on it. And I see the inner child as being, to give you, let me put it this way. over the years, in the time that I've been doing energy work and healings on people, and I don't do them much anymore, I do more teaching than anything else, I found out through talking to people and doing energy work on people, and by, shall I say, probing. And what I mean by probing them is I developed a real skill when scanning a person's energy field with my hand, of being able to move beyond just the physical appearances of the body that I was scanning, and I was able to get into the other bodies, for example, the emotional, the mental, and what I like to call the inner child. And I found out by hundreds of different cases that the end result of everything that you are today and will manifest tomorrow is in direct relationship to your inner child. That's the word I'm going to use. So if anybody's asking me, well, what's the containment of the inner child as consciousness, I would say potentially love, compassion, fun, excitement, enthusiasm, all of the positive ones, and also all of the negative ones, anger, frustration, disappointment, depression, sadness, melancholy. All of those are two sides of the same coin, two sides of a state of consciousness. And over the years in scanning people, what I found out is the time of physical puberty is probably the most crucial time in our development. And as much as I hesitate in saying this, I don't fully think that society and parents as a whole fully understand how crucial that puberty is in the time of development in our children. I don't think our educational system at this particular point in time, public school or high school, is properly oriented to the development of character and the development of the inner child of males and females as they're going through school. I think our whole school system needs to change, and it needs to be more oriented to creative endeavors as opposed to learning the simple spelling and math, which is secondary, in my opinion, to what they need to be learning to do at the particular point. To give some credence to my thoughts, what I found out in the scanning efforts with people, I found out that if you can imagine yourself back at the age of puberty, you can all remember when you started puberty pretty much. You can remember it was a very confusing time, a very difficult time. Your body wasn't doing what you wanted it to do, and it was doing all the things you didn't know what it was doing. But at the same time, there was another important thing taking place, and it was this. The consciousness of you at the beginning of puberty and the consciousness of your inner child, what some people want to call the subconscious, at that point were very, very close together, very close together. And you, for about 10 years, give or take, were like a sponge. You were sucking up everything. Whatever experience you had, positive, negative, and even your genetic and hereditary traits from your family, your bloodline, and even your soul group were being incorporated into your inner child in that particular perspective. To give you an example of how concrete I believe this, I'm going to give you an example. The influence that parents have on their children, present or not present. I can recall 3 cases in the situation where I worked on individuals who had had children in their younger years and gave them up for adoption and never saw them for 20 or 30 years afterwards. And then suddenly after 30 years, they finally find each other by whatever circumstances. And lo and behold, it blew me away to find out that the children had picked up on a lot of the templates, belief systems, idiosyncrasies, and little habit patterns of the parents, yet they'd never seen them. Isn't that amazing? How does that happen? It happens because there is a link that cannot be broken between parents and children. And it behooves me to remind a lot of people that if you're going to think about becoming a parent, think about getting yourself in the best shape physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually that you can. Because I think one of the biggest problems in our society right now is that we have a lot of people who have become parents who should not be parents at all, because what we have done is we have spawned a whole generation of people, and in this particular situation, who have nothing going with the other aspect of simply being material in that particular situation. And I think more people need to take very seriously about being parents in a situation, because your kids are going to grow up and are going to acquire your attributes, habits, and belief systems, and addictions, functions, dysfunctions, creative abilities, and whatever. I always notice that when you see, kind of funny, you see movie stars who have kids and they become movie stars. You see hockey players who have kids and they become hockey players. You see, it's a repeat pattern, all right? Positive or negative. But there are things that can be done with it, and it all happens when you're going through the puberty phase. And the beauty of the system is at this particular point is what happens is because you're so close together, you sponge everything in. Now, if you happen to have had any kind of abuse or be a recipient of some kind of abuse, mentally, emotionally, sexually, prior to or during, then you can imagine the trauma that has been bestowed upon the little girl or little boy that lives inside of you. Now, I want to touch on something here for a minute that may come as a surprise to some people. Everybody has, in the spiritual community, has an idea that you have your conscious self, which is your waking state self, and you have your higher self, or whatever label you want to choose. But you also have another aspect, and that's your inner child. And you, the conscious you, knows that you want to grow and evolve and become spiritual and connect with your higher self. But I think what a lot of people don't know is, as you, the conscious self, are in a parental role. I'm not talking about if you have children. I'm talking about your parental role is to parent your inner child, your little boy or your little girl, to maturity. All right? I'm going to ask you all a question. How many times in your social circle or your friends or whatever, you have somebody you've known since you were a teenager, and now you're 30, 40, or 50 years old, and that person that you knew that was an idiot then is still an idiot now, still immature, still irresponsible, still doing the same things, whatever. I'm not criticizing anybody here. I'm just making conversation and pointing out some things here that maybe you may not be aware of. Well, why are they still like that? They're like that because the inner child has had some kind of trauma, never had a chance to grow and evolve, and the person at a conscious level does not understand that it's his or her responsibility to bring that inner child to maturity and to awaken them. And a lot of people just don't get it at this particular point in time. So that's why I'm doing this video, and I'm going to do probably a series of them in the not too distant future here, depending upon the interest that seems to be involved in it. So what happens is, going back to the particular situation here, is we're now coming into the situation where a great many of us are experiencing Kundalini awakenings, heart center awakenings, and we're having connections with other people. And if you don't think that your inner child, your little boy, your little girl, with all of the programming and all of the belief systems and the templating, especially about love and sex and relationships that are templated into your little boy, little girl, are not having an influence on me, call me. I want to talk to you. You got some issues, all right? So what happens is, along comes the energy of doing this, and all of a sudden, some of you find yourself with all kinds of emotional stuff coming up. You're expressing all kinds of stuff, and sadness and melancholy, the dark night of the soul. You go into complete fits of happiness and sadness and this and that and the other thing. What's going on? What's wrong with me? What's happening is part of the spiritual awakening and part of the ascension process, part of the evolutionary process, part of being part of the spiritual community, is the awakening itself. And the awakening itself consists of you understanding something that you, as the middle part between your higher self, you, and the little girl, little boy that lives inside of you, it is your responsibility to understand that you are now a parent, and you have to parent your little boy, little girl, in a nurturing, compassionate, gentle, and loving way to do something that a lot of you don't want to do. And that is to become spiritually mature. So what happens? You now enter in this part of your spiritual awakening, ascension process, etc., 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 whatever you want to call it, what I call spiritual puberty. This is exactly what so many of you are going through right now, and you don't realize it. What is spiritual maturity, or spiritual puberty, excuse me. Spiritual puberty is the aspect of the little boy, little girl, waking up and wanting to grow. And let me tell you something that a lot of you don't know, all right? And again, I'm not bragging. I'm simply presenting information based on my own experience because I went through all of this stuff, and that's why I created the exercises that I did. So what happens is you're going through all of this stuff, and some of you even break out in pimples again, all right? And, you know, you go through this stuff, and I say, why am I breaking out in pimples all over again, all right? And here you are, you're 30 or 40 or 50 years old, and suddenly you're breaking out in zits, all right? And I'm going to tell you why. When you're going through the puberty phase, you're going through all of those biological changes, all of those hormonal changes. You have within your body what's called the endocrine system. It's a series of glands and ducts throughout the body. Again, I'm not a physician, and I don't know that much about it. I have the bare essentials of understanding. I'm no expert, so don't take me seriously. If it resonates with you, listen to what I have to say. As you incorporate, as you, say at the age of puberty, your waking consciousness and your little boy, little girl inside, some of you like to call it the subconscious, that's okay too. But understand that consciousness has awareness. It's not dumbing. It's not dumb. It has awareness. It is a functional state of consciousness. Not as awake as your waking state of consciousness, but it's functional. And I got another surprise for you. It's also part of the spiritual evolution. As much as you want to grow consciously up, the little boy, little girl inside consciously wants to grow up. So you're going through spiritual puberty. The problem is, I don't see enough information on this process in the spiritual community, even up on YouTube. Oh, yes, I've seen some videos on it, but I didn't really like the way they were explaining it because it's too complicated. You have to simplify things for people. It's not that people are stupid. It's you have to simplify it. If you can't put it in terms that the average person can understand, it's basically useless information. So what happens is by the time you get through puberty, you get to be 18 or 19 or 20 years old. The endocrine system then goes into a lock and load situation, and basically for the rest of your life, you're going to secrete hormones into your body based on what you have incorporated in belief systems while you're in that phase of being close and you sucked in all of that information, knowledge, genetic and hereditary traits from your parents and or otherwise influences around you, be that positive or negative. And the end result is you as an adult, there you are. So then suddenly, 10 or 20 or 30 years down the road, you feel fire roaring up your back, you got Kundalini moving in your body, your heart center blows open, and suddenly you have all of these feelings, thoughts, emotions, and everything else rushing out in gargantuous amounts, which are totally overwhelming. You fall in love, and with this and that and the other thing, and guess what's happening? You might just want to see yourself like you're in a diaper all over again because you're going through spiritual puberty. That's what you're going through. Spiritual puberty. It's a word I rarely hear talked about in the spiritual community at all. Rarely. I don't know whether people don't want to admit that they're going through spiritual puberty because that's what you're doing. Part of the process is to getting the inner child, the little girl, the little boy, to begin to grow. Because that consciousness wants to grow. He wants to be able to grow up and to become more adult in its perspective. So you have the three aspects. You have the higher you, the middle you, and the lower you. And this has been around for millennia. This is not new information I'm putting out here. Just a little variance and a little things that I've added to it. So you are going through spiritual puberty. So the idea is you need to understand that a lot of the stuff that's going on right now with, and again, I'm going to just emphasize this for a minute, with twin flame unions and twin flame relationships and sacred partnerships and divine partnerships and soulmates. I don't want to leave anybody. Did I leave anybody out? No, I didn't leave anybody out. Got them all in there, so they shouldn't be upset with me. So you're all going to go through this in varying degrees. So why is it we have so many people so confused about what's going on? Why is it when people say, well, you need to work with yourself? They always tell you need to work with yourself, but they don't give you any idea of what you need to do. Well, that's what I'm here today. I'm going to tell you what you need to do, and I'm telling you what you need to do. And I'm also going to say to you, I can also help you if you want to help, because this is what happened to me. What I just described to you is exactly what I went through. And I woke up with a rampant Kundalini energy going through my body, living in a world of insanity for at least a year, borderline psychotic, as it were, afraid to go to my doctor, and afraid to talk to anybody because I didn't know what was going on. So I basically went through it all by myself. And at that time, we didn't have the internet, so I used books and books that I could find. And what I found out is because that I come from a very dysfunctional family, where there were a lot of addictions, alcohol, sexual abuse, very poor upbringing, and also times were tough around our house. There were days, well, we didn't eat that good. And I found out that I was suffering from dietary, nutritional imbalances, whatever you want to call it, while I was growing up as a teenager, all right? And this affects the development of the body physical, and also affects the other bodies, and especially the growth of the little girl, little boy inside. It can be really stunted, all right? Now, having said that, I know what I'm talking about. So what I did was I knew that I had some things I needed to do when I had my awakening. And I spent a lot of time looking around, spending a lot of money, looking at this, that, and the other thing, but it didn't go where I wanted to go because I knew there was a part of me that I needed to love, cherish, honor, and allow to flourish. In other words, I knew I needed to fall in love with me. Whether you love me or not, I couldn't give a shit, all right? Doesn't bother me one way or the other. I know that I needed to love me, and I didn't even like me at that time. So what I did is I came up with some exercises over the years, which initially were for me to help me to get in contact with the little boy inside. And the one thing that really used to get me going was I was meditating at that particular point in time, trying to contact that inner Mel. And I was having problems because I was very impatient, and I would get frustrated, and I would get mad because I didn't seem to be making any progress. And the more I got frustrated and mad, the less progress I made. So finally I realized that if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to go this like I'm a parent, like I'm actually raising my son, if I'm going to put it that way, or you're raising your daughter. And your daughter and your son lives inside of you, and it has a state of consciousness and it wants to grow. It's not the subconscious anymore. The subconscious is old date history and gone. We're now talking about the inner child that is now the recipient of a Kundalini and a spiritual awakening that wants to grow and evolve. Are you with me so far? Okay. So what I did was I created for myself some exercises. They were pretty rudimentary in the beginning, and they were a form of visualization and meditation simultaneously at the same time. And I made them visual because I had experimented with the idea of some of those things you've seen in the old days, positive thinking and expressions like mental talk, positive self-talk. And yeah, hey, I'm feeling great. Talking in your head. I love me. Who do you love? That kind of stuff. Positive affirmations, whatever. No, didn't work. All right, didn't go deep enough. Didn't get to the core issue. So what I did was I discovered that if you want to communicate with the little boy, little girl inside, mental talk's not going to work. What you get is you got to put it into picture form. Because a little boy and a little girl, that's how they incorporate things. The only way that they can incorporate things is if they see it or they feel it. All right? Now, what I mean by see it or feel it is they have to live the experience to actually incorporate it as a change or a template within them. In other words, if someone comes up and slaps you in the mouth, all right, you're going to feel the pain of it physically, and the little boy, the little girl inside is not going to forget about it. All right? Or if someone does something abusive to you, you're going to feel it because you see it, because you were part of it. So therefore, it's a picture. And if that picture is repeated, the little boy or the little girl inside takes it on and it becomes enhanced. With each time a pattern is repeated, it gets enhanced. You get the picture now. So you have to do the same thing if you want to fall in love with yourself and have a relationship with yourself. You have to do the same thing. You have to communicate with your little boy and your little girl in pictures, visualizations, but not just any kind of visualizations. You have to do something else first. You have to get into the right vibrational energy to energize the picture that you're going to send to the little boy or the little girl inside so that she or he can get the message by coming in with a positive template. Most of the pictures that people get deeply templated into the little boy and the little girl are all manifested through the emotional center of the solar plexus chakra. Ah, eureka. Discovery I made was, if you do it from the heart center, you have a different energy. Most of us call it unconditional love. And I'll tell you a little secret about unconditional love. I hear so many people pontificating about unconditional love, and they know jack shit what they're talking about. They give these general spoofs that have been around the spiritual community for decades and still don't say anything. All right? Unconditional love is just a belief system that has been regurgitated generation after generation amongst the spiritual community. When you go to the heart center and you focus on the energy that's emanating from the heart center, it's not unconditional love. It's source creative energy, period. Leave the love out and save your soul, okay? The idea is if you can get to the heart center and you can see and visualize a picture and energize it, you're communicating and connecting with the little boy, the little girl inside. But first you've got to get templated up here. I created an exercise for that. All right? And guess what? It worked. So I was on a roll. So I got more excited and I wanted to take it further. So I created more exercises. When I want to make a long story short, I created a series of 15 exercises. They all work. And I used 10 of them to train the practitioners that I'm training in the healing modality. And I also use them to train and to help people change where they're going through. Because there's one thing that I need to understand, and I'm not promoting myself here. Yes, I am, or I'm not. Kidding. Okay? But I wanted to share this with you because I see so much going on in the spiritual community right now where people are confused why they're going through all of these things and why they're having all of these difficulties, even though they think they're highly evolved. But what they don't understand is the little boy and the little girl inside. And I'm going to make a statement here that's going to sound a little bit perhaps off to some people. But eventually through the process of evolution, and I'll throw in spiritual awakening and keep the spiritual community happy. They like that word. I call it evolution. They call it spiritual awakening. It's okay. No big deal. During this process of evolution, what's going to happen is the little girl that used to be called the subconscious or the little boy that has a state of consciousness, as I said, when you're this close together. Say, for example, remember when you were 11 years old? Well, you and the state of that little boy, little girl is at the same age. That's the state of consciousness that the inner child is at. It has the state of consciousness of about a 9 or a 10-year-old child, but it wants to grow and evolve. And it has a chance to do that when you're going through puberty. But guess what? Our society and the way we parent our children is so screwed up. The end result is what we see going on in the world today. So we must go through another process of spiritual maturity, which is now taking place as part of the evolutionary process. I hope you're understanding and getting, because I get excited talking about it, as obviously you can see. If anybody can see the energy, it's just banging around my head here. So what happens is when you communicate in the way that I'm describing, the little girl, little boy can start to grow and evolve. Throws off the chains of limitation, changes the picture and the value system of itself, and suddenly it starts to move up in vibration and consciousness. And when it does, suddenly your waking state of consciousness, which you live in three-dimensional reality, can now move up into the fourth, fifth, and sixth, and seventh dimension of consciousness. Higher self can now just start to come down, and we have an integration taking place. Like that. All right? And suddenly, you're becoming one with one. You. And that's the process that's taking place on the planet right now. All of the people that I see in Facebook groups and a lot of people up on YouTube are all going through spiritual puberty. This word, spiritual puberty, is going to become very popular in the next 6 months. I'm going to make it so. Because it's exactly what's going on. We don't have enough tools at this point, and I got the tools in the toolbox. I've had them for years, and they work on me. And I'll tell you what else I know. They work on everybody else with the exception of 2 people in the last 4 years I've been testing them on. Only 2 people were not successful with them. So, having said that and gone on long enough here, and I think this will give you some insight. If any of you are interested in some real tools to work with, you can go to our Twin Flame site, twinflames.ca. There's some information on there. And if you're interested, you can get a hold of me. I'm the facilitator of them. And I'll tell you something. When I walk you through this program, you will be a lot more grown up than what you think you are now. And you'll be ready for anything that comes along at this particular point. I created them for me, but I will share them with you, but I'm not going to do it for free. My free information is scattered all over YouTube. All right, somewhere along the line, the Melvinator's got to make a buck too. All right, have fun, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the video. I really liked doing this one for you. It was great fun. If the response is good, I'll put up more videos in this area to help you a bit more along the way. Have a great day, everyone.